it's still important to ask how people are doing. It's important to show that you care, that you remember, acknowledge it. It's okay to tell people that they can talk to you about it. So communication really is key and really important in this realm of keeping your social support system strong, as well as acknowledging all of the deep feelings that come with living with a diagnosis. Hello, everyone. This is Liz Curran. Welcome back to this week's Factor in Action. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about grief in the relation to the releasing suppressed emotions factor. So something I like to make sure people are aware of is that it's important when you receive a diagnosis to consider that grief is part of it. It's an emotion that does come along with receiving such heavy news and some big emotions that occur over time. And it's not something that maybe comes upon you right away, but as you look back over time, you may have some grief about things that either weren't able to happen in your life or that changed in your life. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. Carla and I once interviewed with a therapist, and she brought up that grief piece. And I think it was really eye-opening for both of us to realize that grief really does play a strong role in that healing journey, whether it's maybe your future looks different or some of your relationships look different. Maybe you're unable to have children, or maybe your relationship doesn't make it through, or you have a tough time with your immediate family. There's a lot of different things that can occur that can be complicated and big emotions, and we put those into that kind of grief category. So making sure that you're aware of grief, and if you are feeling that way, that you take the time to pay attention, give your body some love, give your emotions some love, and to make sure that you are getting the help that you need if you feel that you need some more guidance in that area for some coping skills. So today I wanted to share this book that I have called The Grief Experience. One of the chapters was written by one of my oldest, dearest friends. She's a grief coach, Karen Arnold. But the book itself is just a really great tool. For those of you who don't already know my story, I lost my sister to breast cancer, which is how I ended up getting into this work. And you can listen to my podcast episode to learn more about that story. But what I found when I started doing this work with cancer patients is when they speak about the things that they lost over time, and when they talk about their relationships and how they changed, it's very familiar to me. It's very familiar in the sense that when you lose a loved one, I call it like a big loss. When you have a big loss, a very large role in your life, you're really close to, those things feel really big, and it changes everything. Changes old friendships, new friendships, maybe your immediate family, maybe your partner, all kinds of different things change in the relationships. And what I like about this book is that Karen really digs into some things that are maybe kind of hard to hear. So I wanted to share a little bit with you from the book. So she talks about some kind of fundamental facts about grief as a whole. And one of the ones she mentions is that people don't like sadness. They don't like being around it. They don't know what to do with it. And when they're faced with another person's sadness, they just don't like it. And that is true. I think that's relatable to everyone. Obviously people don't want to be sad, but some people are more well equipped than others to show up for you when you're feeling that way. And it may be different from a perspective of, maybe someone who could show up for you during a divorce maybe can't show up for you the way they did then with a cancer diagnosis. So it's really important to keep all of that in mind when you're thinking about your relationships, and as they change and evolve, keeping the ones that feel really, really supportive and emotionally supportive and connective to you. I think it's really important to acknowledge those and to really nourish those relationships, and maybe give some space and some time to those who don't like sadness and don't want to be around sadness. Another point she likes to make is your grief makes people around you feel helpless. They have no idea what to say or how to act, and things are different. And I can say that is true from my loss, and it's very relatable as well to a situation with kind of a large life-changing diagnosis. So grief makes people around you feel helpless. And sometimes, unfortunately, people may say things that they can't be there for you, or they don't understand how you're feeling. And a lot of that goes back to how it's their perception of what it would be like for them. So I know when I have had losses in my life, people have passed away, other people's responses and reactions were really, really big, and they may not have even known me or the person that passed very well. And I immediately just could sense that it was more about their response to their own loss, if they were to have one, and how devastating it would feel for them. So I think I can relate that to this diagnosis in many ways, because, if you're someone who hasn't been touched by someone you love having cancer, I think you're in the minority. So many people know someone that has been touched by cancer or themselves have been touched by cancer. And it's so hard to articulate how that feels. So a lot of times people hear that and they really get discouraged or scared, or all these different kinds of emotions can come up. And what's important is that you protect yourself and you don't let other people's feelings and emotions penetrate you. It's enough to deal with what you have on your own. So it's important to really spend some time with, again, those people that are supportive and really are showing up for you the way that you need. Another thing that they talk about in the book is that you don't have to fix it. You don't have to fix people. You don't have to tell them it's going to be okay. You can tell them, yeah, it is really hard. It's a hard situation. And I understand if it's difficult for you to hear, but it is also really hard for me too. And be honest, it's okay. Having open communication is really key for keeping relationships nurtured and letting people know how you feel. You get to decide who gets to know that information and who you can feel connected to in that way. Sometimes people will ask you, what is it that you need? You're asking me what I need, but I don't know what that is. And I think that's something I hear a lot. And I felt that way also, I'm here if you need anything. Well, what does that mean? I appreciate someone saying that to me, but what does that really mean? It just means that they're thinking about you and maybe they're available if you need something. So when we talk about social support in the ways of radical remission, we talk about having things prepared and ready when when someone's going to offer you help, you know what you're going to need. So you might not know right away, and you might need more at different times as things ebb and flow with a diagnosis. So it's really important to keep track of ways that are tangible ways for people to connect with you, because the best way that I experienced this after my loss was letting people in. And, people were willing to make you a meal. Well, I don't really need a meal, or they're not even going to make me something I'm going to want to eat. I have dietary restrictions also. So when someone shows up with a meal that isn't the right fit, I still felt really supportive and really loved by have somebody in mind right now that I wasn't expecting a meal from. And it was just such a sign of how important I was to her at that time. And it felt really, really nice. So just say yes. And if you can give guidance on a meal that you'd like, or maybe a place that you like to order food from that they can get you a gift card, or even just an Instacart gift card so you can get your own groceries, or even just sending them a recipe of something that you really like, can allow that person to come into your space. It allows them to feel included and that you care about them, and then they want to care back and give you more care. And the last thing I wanted to point out on this was that in the book it says, you see my loss as a date on a calendar, and that can become to look as a past event, but it's not. And I think that is also true of people with a diagnosis. I often hear about how people's friends kind of forget, or they just kind of pretend that it never happened, or they just move on, or someone with a metastatic diagnosis may be living with this for a long time. It's still important to ask how people are doing. It's important to show that you care, that you remember, acknowledge it. It's okay to tell people that they can talk to you about it. So communication really is key and really important in this realm of keeping your social support system strong, as well as acknowledging all of the deep feelings that come with living with a diagnosis, or even just receiving the diagnosis, and making sure that you take the proper time to address the grief, acknowledge that it is grief, and then take the time to prepare to release those emotions. And some ways that you can do that. One is, obviously you can get a grief therapist, or an oncology social worker can also help you with those kinds of feelings. Journaling can be really powerful if that is something that you like to do, spending time in the morning, just writing a brain dump about how you feel, or maybe even writing a few questions on the top of a journal so that when you are ready to journal, you have a prompt ready to go and just help you get those emotions out. I find that it's very helpful to spend time in meditation when I'm feeling like I need to release suppressed emotions, because finding time to sit in quiet is really powerful, and it allows our subconscious to talk to our conscious and really let them connect over how are we feeling, and then maybe a little bit about why we're feeling that way, or how we can work on feeling differently. And only we know what's going to work for us. So making sure you have that time to sit in quiet, whether that's in meditation, and if that's not for you, then maybe just sitting in quiet reflection for 5 minutes. Just try sitting in quiet for 5 minutes. Maybe you have that journal next to you, and then when the 5 minutes is up, you just brain dump and write thoughts. But making sure that you're getting those emotions out so that you can acknowledge them and let them leave your body. It doesn't mean that they're going to be gone forever and you're never going to feel sadness or grief again. But the more you process it and the more you practice working on it, the easier it's going to be, and the less likely you are to go super deep into those deep, dark places, and just giving yourself the tools and setting yourself up for success on how to handle that in the future. So that's it for today's Factor in Action. I hope that was helpful, and please check out the show notes for some resources, and we'll see you next time.